The next era of the DC Universe kicks off this weekend with Black Adam starring Dwayne Johnson. Now, my full review is now up. In today's video, I'm going to be diving in and ranking all 12 DC Universe films from worst to best. Now, let me know down below what your guys' thoughts are on this ranking. Do you agree with me? Do you not? What is your ranking? Because that's the most important part, is I love reading your thoughts, as well as make sure to hit that like and subscribe button for more videos like this. But without further ado, I have a lot of other DC content coming up over the next couple of days, so if you enjoy that, make sure to tune in for that. But let's get straight into this ranking. That's where it leads me. At my number 12 is the original cut of Justice League that had come out in theaters. Now, initially when I first saw this movie, I actually kind of was like, oh, this actually is not too bad. It kind of reminds me of a Justice League cartoon show in some way, corny, cheesy, and all sorts of things like that, and I enjoyed it seeing the whole entire team together. My biggest issue with this movie is all of the drama that came out afterwards that really started to put a damper and, truly enough, a saddening news. And when you see the actual version of Zack Snyder's vision, it makes this movie look like complete crap. And now it's just one of those movies that I'm going to keep on my shelf, because one day I feel like they're just going to completely evaporate it from the world, and I will sell that for a good price. But other than that, Justice League is not a good film. My number 11, we have the original Suicide Squad. Now, I know a lot of you guys are saying release the Ayer cut. I don't know if Ayer's cut would be a definitive better version of this, but I imagine it probably would be, since this version is hot garbage. I was so excited for this movie, and when I first initially saw it, I had to talk myself that was a good film. Then I went back and saw it literally 12 hours later, because I had to see it again for my own eyes, and I didn't like it. But I still could not fathom that this movie was bad. So I went a third time. And yeah, after that time, I was like, yeah, this is not a good movie. This is probably one of the most disappointing films that I've ever seen. I love the Suicide Squad comics, so the fact that this original cut sucked, I love the tone that they were building from the trailers, I love the cast of characters that they decided to put in here, and just overall, it was a complete and utter mess. The only pro this film had was the character bonding moments, like between Deadshot, Harley Quinn, Killer Croc, even Katana. I really love what they did with that. And while we'll talk about James Gunn version later in this ranking, I did still like the character banter in here, and I thought that was the best part about it. So I guess I could watch this one more time, but you would have to force me to watch it. My number 10, this is where we're really going to start turning heads, and I'm sorry, the original Wonder Woman. It's not my cup of tea. I like this movie. I think it's actually really damn good at times, but the entire third act just dragged and killed the movie for me. I think the movie has great action. I think it builds up a great mythology of the character, and I think Gal Gadot proves that she is an epic and badass Wonder Woman. Chris Pine is a huge standout of this movie too, but after the No Man's Land scene, I just kind of completely get lost without this movie, and I truthfully do not feel a lot of passion for this film. Now, maybe that's just personally because of on a rewatchability, I just don't really care to go back and rewatch this one too much. I also think Ares is one of the weakest villains of the entire DC universe. I know a ton of you will probably be screaming in the comments section right now, and I understand. That's fine to disagree with me. That's why film is subjective, but the original Wonder Woman, I love Gal. The movie just doesn't truthfully work for me all the way. That's where we get to my number 9, which is Wonder Woman 1984, a film that I completely think is misunderstood, as well as a lot of these DC Universe movies. But I also look at this movie as kind of like a nostalgic kick in the ass, because it reminds me of the Christopher Reeve Superman movies, and I truthfully like what the DC Universe and what Patty Jenkins was going for. Was it in a perfect manner? Not at all, especially on some rewatches, I can see those. But I watched this movie, and I thoroughly enjoy it because of those. Now, it does fall apart in, truthfully, the last act and some of the explanations that it decides to do with Chris Pine, specifically when you start to rewatch it and see some of the plot holes in those moments, but I think Gal Gadot turns in an even better performance, and probably is one of the strongest performances in this entire movie. I wish Kristen Wiig had more development as Cheetah. I don't think there's enough there, but man, did I love Max Lord. I think Pedro Pascal was fantastic in here, and the themes and thematics in here were wonderful. If this movie would have came out during the Christopher Reeves era of superhero films, this would probably be one of the all-time classics, but the fact that it came out during the modern age doesn't jive and fit completely well. I think a lot of other people expected some better mythology world building when it came down to Wonder Woman 1984. I enjoyed this movie a lot. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that, so let's just continue on with the ranking. Before we come down to my number 8, which is Harley Quinn in the Birds of Prey movie. Now, I really dig this movie. In fact, I find this to kind of be like one of my comfort movies that I just put on at times to just smile, laugh, and completely enjoy. Now, this movie does deal with a lot of thematics. In a way, it's kind of a sequel to the original Suicide Squad, dealing with Harley Quinn breaking up with the Joker and going off on her own merry way. And I think this film actually established Margot Robbie as all-time best comic book casting of all time. I think she is up there with the likes of Iron Man himself, Robert Downey Jr., and Chris Evans' Captain America as indescribable, perfect casting that you truthfully could never recast. And I know eventually they will, and there's obviously Lady Gaga is also going to be playing Harley Quinn, but I think Margot Robbie is the perfect embodiment of that all, and I find Birds of Prey to be a lot of fun. The action is filmed very well, and I also think they did a really good job with Ewan McGregor as Black Mask. Again, this is just a fun movie that I thoroughly enjoy every single time I watch it, and it's a shame we never got a sequel with this entire cast, because Black Canary was freaking epic too. Speaking of epic, at my number 7 is Aquaman. Now, Aquaman is only this low because this is actually the one movie in the DC universe that I have watched the least amount of times besides Black Adam. That's just because Black Adam just came out. Aquaman I find to be a little bit tad bit too long, but what James Wan crafts here is a fantasy epic under the sea that is so splendid. Love the tale of two brothers here and their issues with one another and the way that it affects Atlantis and also the people of the, of course, land dwellers, I guess you could say. I think James Wan's vision for this movie was absolutely insane. The action in here, I will actually admit, I think is probably personally my favorite action scenes in the entire DC universe, specifically for the way that it just goes completely bonkers, and also the way that the film and everything is shot. It's shot in such a fluid and paced out manner that truthfully brings me in every single time I watch it. The only reason I just don't go back to this movie all too much is I do find the pacing to be a little bit jarring at times with this one, and as well, it's a little bit too long for my taste. And at my number 6, it is Batman v Superman, the Ultimate Edition. We do not even talk about the original released version of that because it was hot shit. But this 30 minutes Ultimate Edition truthfully gave me a lot more depth to both Batman and Superman. It established Ben Affleck as one of my favorite versions of this character, and it also established a little bit more development of Henry Cavill as Superman. And I love the rivalry. I love that this isn't just them going toe-to-toe. There is this egotistical kind of buildup of mythology between them both, and as well as Lex Luthor. Now, I don't love Jesse Eisenberg as the casting, but I think there were some intriguing elements to it all, and some of the action scenes in here are just so damn good. The final fight with Doomsday, I love the ferocious destroying of all of this landscape because it feels epic in every manner. The score is awesome in every sort of way. And man, I just cannot get enough of Batman v Superman. I'm in the minority on this one, but this is one of those movies that I do think is a little bit misunderstood. And if you have not watched the Director's Cut, the Ultimate Edition, you absolutely should. Before we get to my top 5, guys, make sure again to hit that like and subscribe, and as well as leave your guys' ranking down below. If you're still in this ranking and you haven't clicked away after I put Wonder Woman so low, again, thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate you guys. And if you want my full review of Black Adam right now, make sure to click that link up above. And speaking of Black Adam, at my number 5 is Black Adam himself. I think this movie is such a great way to usher in the next era of the DC universe. And I say that because I think Dwayne Johnson doesn't just usher in a very powerful, unbreakable, unstoppable being into this universe. What he also does is bridge the gap from the original era of the DC universe, bringing over some of the greatness of that all, but also establishing new mythology and adding in not just one new character, but multiple new characters. What he does here for the mythology is adding new stuff to the word of Shazam and everything that kind of goes about that, which I think actually elevates the film Shazam, which is one of my favorite DC Universe films as well, and one of my favorite DC characters in general. But also what he does is he introduces the JSA with Pierce Brosnan as Dr. Fate, Aldous Hodge as Hawkman, Quindessa as Cyclone, and of course Noah as Atom Smasher. And while I didn't love Atom Smasher, and I think Cyclone could have been written a little bit better, but I still really love the design and the costume design and her powers, Dr. Fate adds a lot of new mysticism to this world, and Dr. Fate is freaking awesome. Hawkman, there's a lot there with Aldous Hodge that gives such a fantastic performance, and The Rock really becomes Black Adam. The action in here is visceral, and besides the likes of Zack Snyder's Justice League and the Suicide Squad and even Aquaman, I think Black Adam is kind of up there with some of the best action in comic book films in quite a while. It's very visceral. It's intense. You see some damn fatalities. Like, if this was a NetherRealm like development, you would have seen a lot of gore and guts as well, and they got away with a lot. I can definitely see why this film probably had an R rating at times that they talked about, but I was thoroughly impressed with Black Adam. I think this is a misunderstood epic, and Lauren Balfe's score is freaking incredible. It's one of my favorites. Speaking of Black Adam, at my number 4 as well is Shazam. Shazam, Zachary Levi, the way that I had this feeling watching this was the same feeling I had watching the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie, and I was so impressed with what Shazam was able to develop in there. Zachary Levi, for me, is one of the most underrated actors in Hollywood, and the fact that he becomes this character is so great. I'm so excited for the sequel, and I think this coming-of-age story really adds a lot. Now, the thing I always love about the DC Universe is how every film feels different, but also in some way, shape, and form connected to the last, and I like that Black Adam is an epic story, while at the same time as Shazam is such a smaller scale story, and I can't wait to see eventually how maybe those two will connect and intersect. Black Adam actually elevated Shazam in a lot of ways due to the mythology. Zachary Levi elevates this world. I just love this character of Shazam. It's so fun, it's so sweet, and God, I love this film. Now, speaking of my number 3, my 3 and up, I think these movies are perfect masterpieces of every sort of light, and at my number 3, it is Zack Snyder's Justice League. This epic, long-running film is one of the most epic comic book movies I've ever seen. I think this is Zack Snyder's definitive, almost his best movie, probably his second best, that I love in every sort of way. I have no issues with this movie. Yes, is there maybe a little bit too slow-mo? Sure, you could argue that, but it doesn't bother me. He really got to flesh out his vision, bring about what he wanted to do. It's brutal, it is awesome, it is the vision that I wanted to see, and I think it is one of the best comic book movies ever created in history. I love this characters. I love the way that he builds up the banter between them all, and again, adding in so much depth that really was missing from that original version, as well as changing and bringing back the scenes that needed to be there. This is one of those films that I love to put on every few months to just kind of rewatch now and just feel totally enamored with. I am so sad I've never gotten to see this in theaters. I plan on one day making a giant event to maybe get to see this in theaters because I think it would be such an epic time, but I think Zack Snyder, this is your masterpiece, man. Or at least, may I say, one of yours, because we have one more film to talk about with that. But it is not my number 2, because at my number 2, it is James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. This is my most watched movie of last year. I saw this movie about 15 times, 10 of that in theaters, 5 at home on HBO Max. Now, like I mentioned, Birds of Prey is a comfort movie for me. So is The Suicide Squad, and so is Guardians of the Galaxy. And I think James Gunn, there's just something with me on that wavelength of what he's done. And I actually think, besides Guardians of the Galaxy, this is tied for me as one of my favorite films of his. The Suicide Squad is irresistibly hilarious. It's brutal. It has such a weird, wacky characters, even wackier than the original Suicide Squad. But each of them work and have some human emotions to them. Ratcatcher, Peacemaker, which, God, don't even get me started on the Peacemaker show, which I would have included in this, but again, this is a movie ranking, not a TV ranking. Peacemaker is awesome. Definitely go check that out because it made me actually like that character. But Rick Flag is great. I loved Idris Elba in this movie. And King Shark, man, he's just the dude. And Polka Dot Man, who knew you could make Polka Dot Man badass? The Suicide Squad is everything I expected that movie to be and more. And I could not express enough how much I love what James Gunn did with that film. But I mentioned I have one more Zack Snyder film to talk about, and you probably guessed it. At my number 1, it is Masterpiece of Steel. I think this is definitively the best Superman movie of all time. I know there are some people who absolutely do not like this movie due to what Superman does at the end of General Zod, but I did not think he even had a choice. I love the thematics that they decided to put in here, and in fact, the reason that this is called Man of Steel is because he is not Superman yet. And I genuinely think when they do eventually bring back Henry Cavill for a new Superman movie, which has already been announced and talked about, it'll just be called Superman. And I think that's the best way to kind of bring it about. I think this is a character that deserves to be established in the DC Universe in a new light and a new era, ushering it in. And I think what we saw in the previous 3 movies with Henry Cavill can be looked at as kind of his origin story in becoming Superman that self. And I think the way that Zack Snyder's Justice League, but technically the original Justice League is actually canon, sadly, I really like what they were able to do with that, and I was thoroughly impressed with all of that. Man of Steel, or should I say again, Masterpiece of Steel, has one of the best scores, some of the best action, and some of the best character development for any comic book character I've ever gone to. And the reason I say this is because as much as I really enjoy the Christopher Reeve Superman movie, it's never really been my jive, my passion. what this one did was it made me look at the Superman character in a completely different light. That is why it is my #1 favorite DCEU movie still. Let me know down below again what your guys' thoughts are. Check out my Black Adam review, as well as make sure to look out for a lot more DCEU rankings. I plan on doing maybe a villain and a hero one. Let me know down below which one you'd like to see first. I also am looking into maybe ranking all the JSA members. If you're interested in that, let me know as well. But thank you so much again for watching, and of course, until next time, stay classy.